if you want to be remarkable, you just make the world a better place and everything else will fall in place after that. I mean, that's what you should be focused on. And I pretty much can guarantee you that Jane Goodall is not sitting around thinking, how can I position myself as a remarkable person? She just wants to make the world a better place. And guess what? Because of that, everybody thinks she's remarkable. That's how it works.
Welcome to the Ideas on Stage podcast, your regular insight into leadership communication.
Hey Guy, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you very much for having me. Thanks for your flexibility in my schedule today.
Yeah, no, I know that you've got something much more important to do. You had something much more important to do today, which is surfing, and I totally understand that. And Guy, in your book, in your new book, Think Remarkable, we are going to talk about your new book today. You talk, one of the things you talk about is how important teachers are, and you also say that sometimes teachers don't see the full impact of their work because maybe they teach some students and then the actual impact happens many years after that teaching experience. Now, I just want to tell you, you don't know this, but you've been one of those teachers for me.
Oh,
I've
thank you.
No, thank you. Starting from university, I've read so many of your books, not all of them, but I've got a list here. And so, just so you know, I read, of course, Think Remarkable Now, but also The Art of the Start, The Art of Social Media, Enchantment, Reality Check, Rules for Revolutionaries. I love that book. Selling the Dream, another great book. How to Drive Your Competition Crazy. And of course, Rich Dad Poor Dad. I'm just kidding. I'm just
Nah.
kidding. I know there's some
You know,
people.
you can be a LLM for me.
I know that some people confuse you or have confused you with Kiyosaki in the past. I don't know why, but that's a different book. But again, thank you very much again. And all right, so Think Remarkable. Is it the 16th book now that you've published?
Yes.
Perfect. Now, in the book, you talk about how to become a remarkable person. For those who haven't read the book, can you define remarkable? What do you mean
Sure,
by in
sure.
this context?
Sure. Remarkable in my context means that you're making a difference. You're making the world a better place. You're making the world a better place for everyone, not just for yourself. And so, my book is called Think Remarkable, not Think Rich, not Think Famous. It's Think Remarkable. And my podcast is called Remarkable People, not rich people and not famous people. So that's my test for being remarkable, which is you are contributing to society.
And I think that's connected to another idea that you shared in the book, which is that even if you've written a book on how to become a remarkable person, but you say that for remarkable people, being remarkable is not the objective, right?
Yes, yes. I don't want to be thought of as a self-help author that, I'm gonna teach you by reading a book or, $5,000 seminar, how to be remarkable. The way I think it works is you make a difference, you contribute to society. It could be as a teacher, a coach, it could be just a parent, you could be, fixing your own life. And if you do that, people have no choice but to think you're remarkable. And as I've interviewed about 260 remarkable people, and I don't think any of them spend any time, waking up in the morning and saying, how do I convince people I'm remarkable? Jane Goodall never did that. Steve Jobs never did that. They're thinking about how they make a great product, how they save the world. They're not thinking about how to position themselves as remarkable.
You say that there are three stages of becoming a remarkable person. In the
Yes.
book, you split the book into these three stages or sections: growth, grit, and grace. By the way, I love the alliteration. And I also love the fact that you've got three sections. And if I remember well, because I read it a few months ago, each section is split into 3 subsections, so it's very easy to follow. Well done. And now
I'm
again,
I'm I'm obsessive compulsive. I like tricolons and I like alliterations. And not only did I get an alliteration, I got alliteration with 2 letters, not just one, right? Not just G, but GR. And I'll tell you something, when I get closer to death, if I am rewriting this book, the sections will be growth, grit, and grave.
but still with a very powerful alliteration. And again, for those who haven't read the book, can you give us a high level overview of these 3 stages? And then, of course, we've got some time to go into a little bit more detail with some of them.
Sure. So, listen, the book is an offshoot of my podcast called Remarkable People. And as I said, I've interviewed about 260 remarkable people. This is Jane Goodall, Steve Wozniak, Margaret Atwood, Stacey Abrams, Stephen Wolfram, Angela Duckworth, Carol Dweck. And I figured out that, well, my God, we have 260 hours of episodes and we have 5,000 pages of transcripts, and nobody's going to listen to or read all that. So we need to condense it, and we take the best and the most strategic and tactical and practical stuff so that people can benefit from all these interviews that they probably would not have been able to do. I mean, it's very hard to get to these 260 people, and I've been blessed with that ability. So I felt it was my moral obligation to get the information and inspiration out of them and put it into a book and a podcast.
And I'd like to jump straight into the grace stage because that's the stage that resonated the most with me. And I'd like to explore some concepts
Sure.
that are part of that stage. The first one is the idea of fulfilling your success oblige, if I'm pronouncing that
Yes.
word correctly. What does that mean?
Well, there's this concept of noblesse oblige, which means that the nobility have this obligation to help other people, help people less fortunate than them. And I, it is a completely positive term, but I just have a negative reaction to the word nobility because it seems like, now you have to be Meghan Markle or Prince Harry to be, have this oblige. So instead of noblesse oblige, I think there's success oblige. And success oblige means that when you are successful, you have a moral obligation to help the rest of the world. And you could see the opposite of this in many American billionaires today that, they have like a personal oblige where they're, I'm a billionaire and I'm going to all I care about is lower taxation for billionaires, and all I care about is the political structure of and their attitude towards crypto because I have a lot of crypto investments, and if they support crypto, I'll support them. And they are the antithesis of grace and graciousness. They're not thinking about society; they're thinking only about the investments and their after-tax income.
And the very fact that you've accepted my invite to this relatively small podcast is the demonstration that you are fulfilling your success oblige. So thank you again. And
Well, listen, you know, I've been on both sides of this equation. Obviously, as a podcaster, I'm also trying to get people to come on my podcast. So I know how difficult that is and what a pain in the ass it can be and how challenging it can be. It took me about 2 years to get Stacey Abrams on my podcast. And so I know what it takes. So I have empathy for other podcasters. So I say yes almost every time, and the only
almost.
time I change things is when the surf is good. I need to delay the start.
It's almost. And also, by the way, in the book, there's another tip that you give, which is don't hear no. And I don't know if you remember, maybe you don't remember, but a few years ago, I tried to get you on the podcast, and you said no, and that was not the right time.
Ah,
But for me, following your advice, there was what I heard was not yet. And so
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
and then I
But
tried
you know, right
again.
now, where are you located, by the way?
London, the UK.
Okay, well, there is someone who is an American historian. Her name is Heather Cox Richardson, and she provides one of the most interesting Substack newsletters. And she basically summarizes the political news every day. And her analysis is just so interesting and so insightful. I've been trying to get her, and she hasn't answered my email, and I'm not giving up because if I can get Stacey Abrams and I can get Steve Wozniak and Margaret Atwood, I can get Heather Cox Richardson. So Heather, if you're listening to this podcast, or if any of you are your friends of listening to this podcast, you tell Heather to like return guy's email.
Yeah, of course. So I hope that at least this will be a way for you to get to that objective. And Guy, there's another interesting idea as part of the grace stage, which is that when it comes to measuring success, you say that we should change how we keep score.
Yes.
Again, tell me more.
Well, I think that as you go through life, it's a sign of maturation that you are changing how you keep score, right? I mean, it may be like when you're a tiny little baby, you know, you measure success in how much milk you can get, and then maybe it's how much candy you can get. And then in high school, in college, you know, it's how what's your grade point average, or you know, how many dates can you get, and then when you're in your 30s and 40s, it's, you know, what's your title? How much money can you get? But as you get older and older, you should, you know, at some point, it's not how much money you get. It's not the size of your house or your car or anything like that. It's, you know, what are people going to remember you for? I mean, that's your scorecard should be what am I going to be remembered for? And have I made the world a better place? Did my existence on the face of this earth make the earth a better place or a worse place? And that's how I think you should end your life thinking.
I love that. And when it comes to success, measuring success, having success, I guess I'm just thinking out loud. I guess that also depends on the decisions you make. And that makes me think of another concept in the stage, in that chapter of the book. You use a fantastic, by the way, it's a surfing analogy, turning and burning, if I remember well. And it's connected to the idea that instead of being focused on making the right decisions, you need to make decisions right. Again, for those who haven't read the book, can you speak to that?
Yeah, sure. So this is something I learned from a Harvard psychologist named Elizabeth Langer. And when she said that, it like just struck me like, oh my God, there's so much wisdom in that because you know, people in tech, especially, we're so dependent on AI and big data and all this kind of stuff, right? And we're trying to make this perfect decision because, you know, we think with enough data and algorithms and AI and, you know, whatever, NVIDIA chips and whatever, we can select the absolute perfect right answer. And I think that is a delusion. So I think you take your best shot using the facts you can and the insights that you have, and then once you make a decision, you switch from worrying about making the right decision to making your decision right. And so that means you have to persevere and grit and use your best talents to make whatever you decided right. Because even if you make the perfect decision, it's not going to be easy. The hard part is implementation, not ideas.
And what's the, again, out of curiosity for our listeners, what's the connection to surfing?
Well, the connection to surfing is when you're in the water, you spend most of the time searching for that perfect wave, you know, that wave that, and you have to consider so many factors like the size of the waves, the direction, who else is going on the wave, you know, what's the tide, what's the wind, there's so many factors. So you try to make this perfect decision, but sometimes you make the wrong decision. You paddle for the wrong wave, or the wave just catches you. And at that point, you know, there's no sense thinking about, oh shit, I made the wrong decision. At that point, now you have to make that wave work for you. You have to compensate for the wave, as opposed to trying to, figure out what you did wrong and how you can get the next perfect wave. Because right now you're on this wave, you better take care of it.
I guess, I mean, I've never surfed, but in that context, it becomes even more important. You need to make it work for you. Guy, I also wanted to go back to the growth stage of becoming a remarkable person. Now, you mentioned one of the guests that you had on your podcast, Carol Dweck. Everyone knows her for her work around growth mindset. So we don't have to talk about growth mindset per se, but you do in the book, you not only mention growth mindset, but you also talk about the importance of being in a growth mindset environment.
Yes.
Can you tell me more
Yes,
about that?
because, and this came to light because of the work of someone named Carol Murphy, who is the protege of Carol Dweck. And she had this brilliant observation that the growth mindset is primarily in your head, right? Do you believe you can take up surfing at 60, or take up ice hockey at 44, or, you know, go from being a worker for the, CIA to becoming a French chef, which is what Julia Child did. And so that's in your head. Can you learn how to podcast? Can you learn how to knit? Can you learn how to surf? That's in your head. But you need to be in a supportive environment, because if you're in an environment where it says, you cannot learn new skills. We hired you for this job. You stay in this job. We don't have any training. We don't have any retraining. We don't have any diversity kind of programs. You're stuck. Now, this can also be at the other extreme. You can see you are so brilliant. You don't need to learn anything new. You don't need to improve because you're brilliant, just like the rest of us. And I think either of those two attitudes just leads to shortcomings in life, that you just don't experience things because you either think you can't do them, or, it's beneath you.
I can relate to that so much, Guy. Being part of a supportive environment has been a crucial aspect for me over the last few years. For example, I'm a very small business owner, a small entrepreneur, and I am part here in London, in the UK, of a community of like-minded entrepreneurs. As part of that community, so that's a relatively large community, and I use that community for advice all the time, but also I've got two accountability groups of people within that community, and it makes a huge difference. So that's true. And there's there's a counterintuitive idea that you mention in your book when it comes to envy. So
Yes.
normally envy is considered a bad thing. In the book, not only do you admit to envying people, that you envy people sometimes, but you argue that it can be a good thing.
Yes. Yes, absolutely. So everybody thinks that envy is bad because it leads you to, making poor decisions. If you, I don't know, if you envy some influencer for her Lamborghini, or her, I don't know, her 20-room house or something. But I would say that envy in and of itself is not the bad thing. The bad thing is what you do with that envy. So if the envy turns you into this negative, angry, jealous person, that's one thing. But I can tell you that there have been experiences in my life, particularly when I was younger, when I envied people. I got a ride in a Porsche 911. I said, "Oh man, I got to get a car like that. I got to drive a Ferrari Daytona." I said, I envy that. I got to get a car like that. And I'll tell you something. So now I'm in this position where I'm envying stuff, like maybe even materialistic stuff. And that drove me to study and work hard. So my take on this is, it doesn't matter what motivated you. What matters is, did you get motivated? And if you got motivated, hallelujah, just declare victory and go on from there. I see. And, later in life, as I took up surfing at 60, I mean, sometimes I'm out in the water and I see people and I see they surf so much better than me. I mean, so much better than me. And I got to tell you, I envy their surfing ability. So now what do? You could, if you don't have the growth mindset, you say, I'll never be that good. I'll give up. I'm going to, like, take up something easy like football. But no, I look at that. I say, okay, maybe I'll never be that good, but I can be better. I envy them, and I'm gonna try to get better than I am right now.
Before we continue with this episode, I just want to share a few resources that I think will be super useful for you. The first one is check out either my book, Confident Presenter, or my colleague Phil Wakenall's book, Business Presentation Revolution, or both. These are books for business owners and leaders who want to take their presentation skills to a higher level. To make the most of the books, take the Confident Presenter Scorecard, which is an online tool that allows you to assess your presentation skills for free in less than 3 minutes. And then also, at the moment, I'm running a series of free presentation skills web classes, and I'd love to see you there. The links are in the show notes. Now let's go back to the episode. It's not MV itself, it's what you do with it to get to where you want to get to. And sometimes, or often, to get to where we want to get to, we need to embrace vulnerability. Again, there's a quote I remember in your book, which I love. Sometimes you win, sometimes you grow,
Yeah.
which is connected to, I guess, your approach to failure. Maybe you've answered that question already, but is there anything else you'd like to
Well,
add
I
when
mean,
it comes to that?
what I was trying to get with what I considered a very clever quote is that some people say, sometimes you win, sometimes you lose. And I'm trying to say sometimes you win and sometimes you grow, which means that you don't lose, but you learn. And as long as you're learning, maybe the next time you're not going to lose. So you don't have to grow. I think that is a better idea that, even when you face failure, you got to grow from that failure. It cannot define you is the key.
That makes me think of a concept that I've learned from you even before this book, like many years ago. And I guess it can be connected to this, because if we think about sometimes we lose or we fail, actually we're saying we grow. One way to avoid the risk that we lose is to, you talk about planting many seeds. Again, for
Yes.
those who haven't read this, who haven't heard of that concept, can you explain it?
Yeah. So I think that many people believe this kind of goes back to making your decision right. That many people believe that, there's kind of two opposing theories. One is you very carefully plant one or two seeds and you very carefully tend to those two seeds because you have all your focus on them because you're trying to make one or two things successful. The other theory is you plant hundreds of seeds and you see what takes root, and then that determines what you take care of. It's whatever you see making progress. I am of the second theory. I think you plant a lot of seeds, and I learned this because I planted oak trees in the hill by my house, and you know, I I was just in that field, and I would say at the top of the funnel, I probably started with 500 acorns, and now at the bottom of the funnel, there's about 4 or 5 seedlings that have sprouted, and they're going to turn into saplings. And even of the 4 or 5, they all won't make it. So maybe I'll get 1 or 2 trees out of 500 acorns. Now, I wish I could tell you that, there's a way to tell that, okay, you got 500 acorns. I can pick out the two that will succeed, right? So you can throw away the other 498. Don't worry about them. They would have never succeeded anyway. We'll just pick these two, which we know were winners. Well, I don't think that's how it works. To get the two, you got to plant 500.
Out of curiosity, Guy, in your career, in your professional life, how did that idea apply to you? Can you think of some seeds that you've planted?
Sure.
Mm.
Well, sure. Like when I was a Macintosh software evangelist, we worked with companies to create Macintosh software. And I wish with even with hindsight, I could tell you, okay, I can pick exactly which companies are going to create the killer app of Macintosh. I could tell you in advance. I mean, if I could tell you in advance, I would only work with those few companies, right? But instead, we worked with thousands of companies because quite frankly, we didn't know who was going to produce the killer app. And come to find out, many of the killer apps came from companies that I would have never predicted would have succeeded because I didn't understand the product or the market, or I had no idea they would create such great things, or they would have such perseverance and keep at it. Whereas, the early stars just gave up too easily or something. So, yeah, Macintosh's survival is a testimony to the power of planting many seeds. We planted thousands of software companies to get just a few winners.
So again, I'm a small business owner, a small entrepreneur. So for people like me, what do you think? What business areas or domains do you think I should, so think about entrepreneurs should focus on for them to be able to increase their chances of success?
Listen, if I knew that, I mean, that's a very difficult question. I can tell you one thing I think every small business, owner should do, which is figure out how to use AI in his or her business. I mean, it would be like if we were back 20 years ago, I would be telling you, you have got to get a internet access or internet presence. You cannot succeed without an internet presence. And I'll tell you, I think the same thing is true today. You cannot succeed without AI. And so you just gotta jump in with both feet into this. I would be astounded if even small businesses are not significantly impacted by AI.
What do you think? There are people who's even experts and respected people who are very concerned about AI and its implications on humanity in general. Well,
Sure. But you know what? That has been true with every big invention, right? There were people there who were concerned with social media, people concerned with the internet, people concerned with, I don't know, fax machines, people concerned with the printing press, right? I mean, before it was like only monks could make the Bible, but now, oh my God, Gutenberg ruined the world. Now everybody can get a Bible. And, if Gutenberg makes it so everybody can get a Bible, they won't come to church. And if they don't come to church, they're not going to listen to us. They're not going to make donations. The end of the world's coming, right? Uh, there's been a lot of predictions about the end of the world because of new technology. I haven't seen it happen yet. And now, so people are predicting this about AI. And now, don't get me wrong, there are dangers with AI. There are dangers with the internet. There's probably dangers with the printing press. That's how you got pornography, right? So there are dangers, but well, for one thing, on a very practical basis, yeah, you can hear all you want about the dangers of AI, but that thing is out of the bag already. You ain't putting that back in the bag. So, you can ruminate and worry all you like, but you ain't changing that. So that's number one on a very practical standpoint. And number two is I think that a lot of people they're writing about the worst case of AI against the best case of humanity. And so they say, well, humanity is, would never start a nuclear war by mistake or just because of ego or something like that. But who knows? What if the Russian LLM and the American LLM start hating each other? So Chat GPT America launches a nuclear weapon attack against Russia. Russia retaliates. So now us poor humans, we had no idea. We let these LLMs take over control, and now they declared nuclear war, and the end of the world's coming because of LLMs. Well, let me tell you something. Let me give you a really, really, it sounds like a fictitious and maybe a theoretical question, but I think this is a dead serious question, which is let's take it as a given that there are nuclear weapons in the world. So somehow something is going to decide when to launch a nuclear weapon. All right. That's a given. I give you a multiple choice test. Who would you like to let start a nuclear attack? A. Donald Trump. B. Vladimir Putin. C. Kim Jong Un. Right? D. You know, Netanyahu. All right. Or E. Chat GPT. I tell you right now, I would put my money on Chat GPT instead of any of those people to launch a nuclear war.
Me too. And I guess, Guy, so you were talking about, so with I guess it's connected to, rather than focusing on making the right decision, we need to make decisions right. So rather than thinking about, okay, should we use it or not? Should we embrace it or not? It's out of the bag already, as you said.
Right.
So we just need to make it right. Now, again, with your podcast, you've interviewed, you mentioned more than 200, almost 300 people, remarkable people. By any chance, is there, and this could come from the people you've interviewed, but in general, in your life, the people you've met, is there one person you've met who you think is the most remarkable person you've met? And if so, why?
Well, I think there have been two in my life. One, of course, is Steve Jobs. He was just beyond anybody I know in terms of figuring out what's going to happen in the future or making his vision of the future come true. There's never been anybody like Steve Jobs. Now, I could tell you a few years ago, I would have said Elon Musk is the closest thing to Steve Jobs, but Elon Musk is the antithesis of grace and graciousness, right? So I don't consider him remarkable. So I think the most remarkable person alive today is Jane Goodall. Jane Goodall. Jane Goodall. She lives in England. She is the most remarkable person alive today, in my humble opinion. Her motivation is so pure, and she has taken, the highest road, and she's trying to save humanity from itself. And she's 90 years old, and she still travels 300 days a year. And I travel 5 days a year, and I'm tired, and she travels 300. So I don't know anybody who has more passion and more energy and has more empathy and concern for the welfare of mankind than Jane Goodall.
Yeah, you travel 5 days a year, but you do surf a lot. So
Well, that's true.
we need to consider that. And now you mentioned Steve Jobs. Am I correct in saying that in your book, I may be totally wrong, guy, but because at some point you talk about different types of assholes,
Yes,
mission-driven
yes,
assholes. So do you consider Steve Jobs a mission-driven asshole? And if I remember
absolutely.
well,
He is
can you
the
explain?
he's the definition of a mission-driven asshole. So, fundamentally, I live in Silicon Valley, so I'm an expert in assholes, and I don't mean in the proctological sense. I mean in the terms of personality. So, two kinds of assholes. One is all about his or her ego. It's all about me, myself, and I. And this company exists for the glorification of me, 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 me. And the other kind of asshole is like mission driven. I want to make the best computer. I want to make the best phone, the best tablet, the best retail store, the best app store. And if you get in the way of my quest to make the best computer, I'm going to run over you. That was Steve Jobs. Now, having said that, I don't want people to think, oh my God, I have to be an asshole and preferably a mission driven asshole to be remarkable and successful. But yeah, I work for a company called Canva. It's led by Melanie Perkins. And I would say that she's proof that you don't need to be an asshole to be successful.
Yeah. You also mentioned, we were talking about when you said no to my very first attempt to get to have you on the podcast, and I heard it as a not yet. I think you mentioned an example of Melanie Perkins in the book where I think she pitched Canva to like 300 investors.
300 times. Yeah. Yeah.
Wow, 300
And,
times.
people think when they see a success, oh, it was very easy for them, like they picked up the phone, they got financing the next day, and it all happened. And That didn't happen for Apple. I mean, arguably, I would make the case if that happens for you, it might be the worst thing that ever happens, because now you don't know what it is to suffer and to be rejected, and you're just going to go through the rest of your life thinking that everything just happens naturally for you, and someday you're going to figure out that, holy shit, it ain't that easy. And I feel sorry for you.
Talking about rejection, you also suggest that, especially at the beginning of your career, you should start in sales.
Yes.
Is that connected to what you've just shared?
Well, yeah, because I think that, well, I think fundamentally there's only two real functions, right? So you either got to make it or you got to sell it. Everything else is kind of secondary. So if you can't make it, i.e., being an engineer, then I hope you can sell it. And so selling is an extremely useful skill. And people don't understand that you are selling every day. You're selling because you want to get a raise. You're selling because you want to get a job. You're selling because you want to get a date. You're selling because you want to be seated, without a reservation. You're selling because you want to get a aisle seat, or you want to get upgraded to first class. I mean, you're always selling. Um, that's a very valuable skill that some people, like, they denigrate, sales as this kind of swarmy, greasy, disgusting thing. But man, learning how to sell is one of the most useful skills you could have in your whole life.
You're always selling. I'm thinking of, I don't know whether he was one of your, whether you interviewed him, Daniel Pink, To Sell Is Human. He wrote that book. Is
Yeah.
it just out of curiosity? Did you have you ever interviewed Daniel,
But
or vice versa, maybe?
I interviewed Daniel Pink, and he has this book about sales and how essential it is to life. Basically, just what I said too.
Yeah.
Maybe I stole it from Daniel
To say, yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, he also says in To Sell Is Human that whether we like it or not, or whether we are aware of it or not, we are all in sales, even
Yes.
even even if we are not, or even if we think we are not. And okay, so with you, Guy, perhaps we don't have to do that because everyone knows you, but let's say that someone has found a way to ignore your presence in the world over the last few decades, and they want to find out more about you, your projects. where
That's
where
not
should
that
they go?
hard to ignore my presence. Yeah, if you want to find out more about me, well, there's my podcast, which I consider the best work I've done in my career. There's my Substack newsletter, which is just Substack Guy Kawasaki. And of course, there's this book. My social media presence, I kind of focus on LinkedIn and Threads. So
Okay,
that's where
perfect.
I am.
And we're going to include all the links in the show notes. Let's close with this, Guy. So we talked about many ideas in your book, Think Remarkable. There are many others. If you think about this topic, if you think about your book, How to Become a Remarkable Person, what's one thing, what's the key lesson that you want your readers to take away from your book?
Sure. I want the key lesson to be that if you want to be remarkable, you just make the world a better place, and everything else will fall in place after that. I mean, that's what you should be focused on. And I pretty much can guarantee that Jane Goodall is not sitting around thinking, how can I position myself as a remarkable person? She just wants to make the world a better place. And guess what? Because of that, everybody thinks she's remarkable. That's how it works.
The rest is a consequence. It's connected to where we started. For remarkable people, being remarkable is not the objective. It's a consequence. Okay, Guy, thank you
Thank you
so
very much.
much.
And thank you for staying up late for me.
No, thank you. I really appreciate your time, sharing your ideas, sharing your insights. Let's keep in touch. And with the when you're going to publish your 17th book, I'm going to
No.
invite you again. No.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much.
If you enjoyed this episode of the Ideas on Stage podcast, there are many more you might like, so please subscribe, leave us a review, and tell us what you think. You can find many more ideas on business communication at ideasonstage.com or by searching for Ideas on Stage on iTunes, YouTube, or wherever you get your podcasts. Thanks for listening, and goodbye for now.